Now you're also getting very positive reviews in another realm, and that is for your by invitation column in the Straits Times. We were talking a moment ago about how you came to write this column in the first place, and I understand you're going to write a total of 10 columns, for the Straits Times.
That's right.
This year, 2013.
Yeah.
How did you come to write it?
Well, I decided to write these columns because I do believe that Singapore is undergoing a major metamorphosis. It's changing. And that's why I say, it can either change from a caterpillar and become a happy butterfly, or from a tadpole to an unhappy frog. For almost 30 years, Singapore was just absolutely dull and boring. Changing, evolving, but no surprises.
But very successful.
But successful. But the last elections has been a watershed elections.
2011.
It has completely changed the political atmosphere in Singapore. You now have far more vociferous opposition voices. But as Taman says, it's good to have a strong opposition. But you also have a lot of negative cynicism emerging in Singapore. And it is this negative cynicism that worries me. Of course, I would say that you must not forget that Singapore has got some positive things that we have accomplished. And don't let the cynicism throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Absolutely, Professor. What do you think is releasing this acid, so to speak, this cynicism?
I honestly, I'm not sure. But there is something that has changed, and certainly the level of trust in the government and trust in Singapore society has gone down. One of Singapore's biggest claims to fame was that if we wanted to carry out public policy, we thought very hard about it, we worked everything out, and we delivered almost perfect results. But then we had serious failures in the MRT, serious failures in housing. So suddenly the feeling is, hey, what happened? We're supposed to have a perfect government. What happened to it?
I find a common thread running through your column so far, 3 so far, and the 4th to come on June the 8th in the Straits Times. The golden thread has been your characterization of the transformation as spiritual. Now, the word spiritual brings all sorts of thoughts, to
well, I was
readers' minds.
I was trying to say that it's obviously not a physical transformation that is happening, because Singapore actually has gone through a massive physical transformation. I also don't think it's purely mental, It's has nothing to do with the rational side of what's happening. And here, in terms of developing a national identity, you don't develop your national identity through your head. You develop it through your heart, And clearly, the Singaporeans are asking themselves in a very profound way, what does it mean to be Singaporean, And part of it, as you know, is provoked by the sudden surge of massive amount of foreign talent, and they are saying, hey, do I own this island? And if I own this island, what does this ownership mean?
Yeah.
It
must hurt a lot.
So that this is a new kind of questioning that is happening. So I hope in my columns to capture the spirit of this questioning, and then hopefully suggest some answers too.
Well, it seems that you have, Professor Mahbubani, because I'm going to share with you a few responses from our readers. We'll start with Straits Times reader Wu Wei Meng, who says on your article, Singapore, Frog or Butterfly, he says, your article, Professor, has articulated so brilliantly the kind of unhappiness I have had over the past year or so as a Singaporean. So it's just a part of what he shared with us. Now, my question to you following that, Professor, is you have tapped so deeply into how Singaporeans today actually feel, as Mr. Wu himself says. And that's quite a departure from your high-level musings in books like The Great Convergence. Why have you taken this particular tack, become more personal, more immediate to your fellow Singaporeans?
I mean, the simple answer is that I'm now a bit more worried about Singapore than I used to be.
I see. Okay.
So, I mean, I thought that I could focus on the rest of the world where there are lots of problems and not worry about Singapore, because Singapore seemed to have the capacity to solve all its problems simply, clearly, rationally. There is a kind of emotional disquiet. You cannot aim the arguments at the head, you've got to aim for the arguments at the heart and figure out what is the cause of this disquiet, you know.
Yeah, thanks, Professor, for sharing that. Then we have Daniel Lam Kong Wing, who says, I think your articles are great and they will be a major contribution to the national conversation. It's taking place in Singapore as we, a country, grapple with who we are and who we want to be. Now, what's interesting about Daniel's contribution is that he then compares what he calls the current angst and discontent among Singaporeans to a person facing a midlife crisis. That, you know, Singaporeans are working so hard, but all they seem to do is to be running on the spot, while, you know, foreigners get all the plum opportunities here. Yeah, your thoughts on that, please, Professor?
Well, I think there's no doubt that the very sharp increase of foreigners in Singapore has caused tremendous amount of resentment. And I think looking back now, it was a mistake, you know, to have such a sharp increase. And so now, but I think it's very clear the government's got the message. Yes. And as you know, now the SMEs are crying and saying, hey, we need more labour, we need more labour. So it's a very tough position that the government's in. But I think we need to also figure out, at the end of the day, what kind of island do we want to have, you know?
Fundamentally.
Yeah, and that, I think, hasn't been resolved, you know? So if you want to be a vibrant, dynamic economy, you've got to accept a very large percentage of foreigners. But if you want to be live in the backwaters and stop growing for 20 years like Japan, then you keep out foreigners. So it's a very tough call you got to make. And so this is a question about values. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What is it you value the most? So that's something that I think there is no consensus. And we need to arrive at a new consensus in Singapore.
And so you're helping us, Professor, through your columns.
I hope so. That's my goal.
And finally, we have Straits Times reader Wong Ting Fat, who would like to ask you, how would you change the current situation to ensure that Singapore evolves into a beautiful butterfly?
Well, I think I would really appreciate it if Singaporeans actually spoke out a bit more and try to address the question, what does it mean to be a Singaporean? How does a Singaporean different from a Malaysian or Indonesian or a Fijian? What is it? It's not just your pink IC, right? Because I mean, anybody can come and get a pink IC after a few years here. What is it defines the heart and soul of being a Singaporean? And that's what I think we need to have a candid discussion about. So yes, we can complain about specific issues like MRT, housing and all that, but that's peripheral. The core issue is, if we are living together on this island, what is it that unites us? What are the values that unite us? What is it, the elements that say we belong to the same kampong? One of the things that I value and cherish the most, of course, when you come from a minority within a minority, is the ethnic harmony in Singapore, you know. And then the question I ask is this ethnic harmony natural, that's developed through natural evolution, or is it a result of very harsh laws that say you cannot say anything prejudicial against another race? So what exactly how real is this ethnic harmony? Will it survive if you remove the harsh laws? We don't know.
There we are. The great unknown that is the world.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Mahbubani.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank
you for giving me so much of your time.
Not at all. It has been our great privilege and pleasure.